What's up guys, Marcus here from Studio One Expert, and in this video we're going to be taking a look at the new features available in the latest update of Studio One, version 3.5 from PreSonus. So, we have a lot of new features here, and if you want to get any detailed information, I would highly advise heading over to your My PreSonus account and downloading the version history and release notes. And here we have detailed information about all the new features and improvements, any changes and any fixes from previous versions. It's all available here. But one thing I want to point out in particular is this area over here. This version introduces an updated file format for songs and projects for faster save and autosave. Files created in 3.5 will no longer open in previous versions of Studio One. This is a big one. I can't stress this enough. If you're currently working on any projects, whether you're in the middle of production or tracking, mixing, if you want to test them out in 3.5, I would highly advise creating a copy or doing a file save to new folder, saving a brand new version and trying it out. Because if you save in 3.5, you can't go back, and it's always a good idea to kind of finish off what you're doing before trying to open things in a new version of Studio One. And the best idea is to start some new projects from scratch in 3.5 so you can kind of see the new features firsthand. Okay, so having said that, let's go ahead and move on here. Okay, first and foremost, a big one over here, something that I've been excited to see, is mixer undo. Made some fader movements and obviously redo. And this works with fader adjustments, and it also works with things like, for example, if I was to make a low cut adjustment here, I could undo that, and it also works with third-party plugins. Now, keep in mind, this is a brand new feature, and it's really hard to test every single combination, so if you do come across a plugin where you find something that's not working as it should, just shoot over a bug report to the good folks at PreSonus so that they can get it scheduled for one of their maintenance updates. Okay, so that's a big one for me. Now, another big one is, it's simple, but I really enjoy having it, is you'll notice here that we now have a visual indication for plugin bypass. So for example, these power buttons now are orange, and that indicates that the actual plugin is bypassed. So very helpful just as a visual aid to have a quick glance at something and know exactly what's active, what's inactive, what's disabled, what's bypassed, and pretty soon, and you'll see this in a moment, what's in the native low latency monitoring path. Okay, let's go ahead and unbypass these. Okay, so the next one, and to me, this is the biggest one, is you'll notice that we have these Z's over here. We've got one in the instrument rack, and we've got one at the bottom of the main outs over here. And if I was to open up my I/O setup, and you can see we have headphone 1 and headphone 2 are enabled as Q-Send. If I was to go ahead and open up my outputs over here, we also have them available over here. And we'll get back to this in a moment. So let's go ahead and have a look at the new preferences over here for the audio setup. Now, the first thing you'll notice is we have two tabs, Audio Device and Processing. Now in the Audio Device tab, we also have the ability to set a separate playback and recording device. So for people who are coming from Logic, this is going to be really familiar, and it's actually quite useful. If you wanted to do something, for example, where you were using a USB mic of some sort as a recording interface, but you wanted to monitor through the built-in output on your laptop, you could very easily set the USB mic to be a recording device, and your playback device, you could set it to be a built-in output on your laptop, and then you could kind of just roll with a set of earbuds and everything's great. Now, the idea here is pretty much the same in that you want to set your device block size as low as you possibly can without getting any clicks or pops. Now the difference here is then we have a processing tab where we set our dropout protection. Now I want to keep this simple and try not to confuse anybody here. So in the most simple terms possible, device block size, set it as low as you can, dropout protection, choose one that works well for your system. I typically stick between medium and high, and those seem to work great for my system. And the cool thing is in the second panel over here, when you have your native low latency monitoring enabled, which to be honest, I can't imagine why anybody would not want to have this enabled, it shows you the audio round trip latency, which in my case is 2.67 milliseconds, and I'm running the new Quantum Thunderbolt 2 audio interface from PreSonus. Now, keep in mind, I can also go down further. So for example, I'm at 32 samples right now. I've kept it there because I'm running ScreenFlow in the background and there's a lot going on. So I just want to kind of make sure that I don't have any clicks and pops. But technically speaking, I could bring this down to 16 as well. Click apply. And now I'd be running at a round trip latency of 1.67 milliseconds. Now, the great thing about this is in order to activate this, we just have to click Enable Low Latency Monitoring. And same thing on our instruments, because you'll notice we also have Enable Low Latency Monitoring for our instrument tracks as well. So essentially what's happening with 3.5 is we have 3 paths or 3 layers in the audio engine. You have one for processing and playback, and that's going to cover all of your tracks, audio or virtual instruments, going through plugins, everything. That will have its own process block size, which is set depending on the dropout protection. So if I set it to high, then our process block size results in 1024. Then we have our audio device block size. So if this is set to 16, this is a completely separate path. It's no longer dependent or linked like they were before. And then we also have an instrument low latency monitoring path as well. And that is enabled by clicking this option over here. And we can also do it directly from the GUI in Studio One. And then this results in a new low latency for recording virtual instruments in sessions that could be completely full or whatever the case is. So very, very easy to use. Now let's just go ahead and, okay, actually we might as well just go ahead and record enable this track over here. Maybe before I do that, I'm going to change this back to, actually, we'll go with 32 because 32 worked pretty well for me. 32 has been rock solid for me for all of the tests that I've done. So now when I select this track and I record enable the track, and keep in mind I'm using tape style monitoring. That's my preferred method of choice. Now here we see these different colors on these plugins. So if you see something in blue, it means one of two things. It means A, that the plugin that you're using is over the 3 milliseconds that they allow to be used in the low latency record path, monitoring path, or B, it's that the actual plugin is not passing audio through it in terms of doing anything sonically. So VU meter, level meter, and tuning plugins like that, they're not going to show up as green because technically speaking, they're not doing anything. They're a visual plugin. We use them visually to see what the tuning is or what the level is, but they're not actually imparting anything. So you won't see them, at least in this current release, you won't see them be in the green state. But for any plugin that is 3 milliseconds or less, you'll see that they have this green power knob. So that means that we're listening to them in 0 latency. We're going to come back to the fat channel in a moment here. But an easy way to see this is if we open up our performance monitor and we show devices, go ahead and move this out of the way for a second, you can see here that we have some detailed information in terms of the latency and also CPU usage. And we can also see that these are monitor effects as well because I have this track record enabled. Now, if I take this off, they disappear. They're no longer up there, but I re-enable it and you can see that they appear here. Now let's have a quick look at, and a quick note on the performance monitor. And this is really nice. When you're setting your levels, it's nice to have this open so you can get a really nice balance between your device block size and setting your dropout protection level. And they actually give you the ability to set the dropout protection level directly from within the performance monitor so that you don't need to actually go into the audio device setup. You can do it directly from here. So that's very handy. And I find myself opening that up a lot these days. Now let's have a quick look at the new fat channels. So we've got a new fat channel. We've got these different modes and modules. And this was borrowed from the new Series 3 boards that we have that had the updated fat channels. They borrowed this. And we also have this different view, a stacked view, so we can see everything together. So we've got, in terms of compression, we've got standard, we've got a tube, and you can pretty much tell just by looking at these. And again, I'm doing this is in my monitoring path. You can pretty much tell which ones these are over here, which hardware units the emulations were actually based off of. And I've also got an equalizer over here. We've got our standard with an updated GUI. Passive, again, pretty easy to tell which models that they were modeled off of. And like I said, I think these sound absolutely great. And we've got a vintage as well. Really nice sounding stuff, very easy to use, very easy to quickly dial in something, zero latency, not much of a CPU hit at all on these, and then of course our limiter, which we can bring that in line. Now, like I mentioned, anything that's running through the native low latency monitoring path, we're going to see a green power button, and that's the easiest way to know what's running through. Okay, so that's it for the new audio engine. Now, in terms of the instrument low latency monitoring path, we also have that as well. I'm going to go ahead and just bypass everything here for a second. In terms of Presence XT, I have a fat channel loaded up on here. I've got a send going. I'm going to go ahead and kill my Q mixes because I don't need these right now. And in the new Quantum, we get a really nice option where we can adjust our headphone routing straight from Studio One. So in my case, I don't have to use QSense because I want my headphones to monitor or mirror my main outs, both my headphones 1 and 2. And then if I wanted to set up another Q mix, I could very quickly do that by clicking and changing the source of, for example, headphone 1 or headphone 2. Another really nice feature. And then of course, our dim, our mute, and our mono, we have those options as well, and also talkback. Now, quick note on talkback, the talkback on the Quantum is actually routed on the inputs over here. You can see it's the 27th input. So if I wanted to add this, I would simply add this like here, select the talkback, apply, and now I have this available in terms of it's in my inputs. And then of course we have talkback remote control over here, and very easy for me to open and close that in Studio One, either with my mouse or through shortcuts. All right, so now a quick note on the integration that we have with Notion. So I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to open up a Notion project over here. This is loading something. Click remind me later, and demo files. Let's go ahead and load Chinese dance over here. And now you can see I've loaded this Notion project over here, and this is, again, using the Quantum at 48. If I wanted to send this to Studio One, in the previous version, 3.3, when we first saw this integration, we could only send it to a new document. But now, in this case, we can send to Studio One. I can merge it into an open document. So whatever document is in focus in Studio One, in this case it would be this one, I could send it from Notion over to Studio One. Now I could also do the same thing in Studio One. I could come to Song and I could send to Notion. And I could send note data of entire song, of selected tracks, audio mixdown. And again, I can merge this into an open document. So that's a step up in terms of the integration and in terms of what we're seeing with Studio One and how it interacts with Notion. Now, they've also completely redesigned the project page, and it happens to be really, really nice. So let's go ahead here, and I've got some recent files. And I'm going to go ahead and open this up. Before I do that, let me just remove the record enabled from Studio One. And now I'm going to go to my recent files, and let's go to our project. Okay, update. Okay, so this has been updated. So we've got a nice, fresh looking GUI. Lots of new features in terms of what's available in the project page. One of the big ones for me is the update loudness, pre-effects and post-effects. So let's say that we had a bunch of different plugins on this and we wanted, some loudness information in terms of updating our track before and after our signal chain. We could go ahead and we could detect this loudness, and this would give us some new LUFS readings in terms of our integrated levels, our true peak, RMS, and also our loudness range average, which is super useful. Now, on that same note, we now have loudness units full scale or relative to full scale. LUFS, we have that available directly within the project page, so we don't have to use any third-party programs. So for example, I can choose K12, K14, and I'm getting the LUFS reading directly from here. Now, if I was to make an adjustment and do something like this, obviously that's going to change the levels. And if I went ahead and did something like put a limiter on here, and I wanted to say take my ceiling down to -1 true peak, this would have a different value now. And maybe we'll do one more thing. We'll do an EQ move of some sort. So I'll grab a Pro EQ and I can just give a little bit of top end. Maybe I'll pull a little bit out here, give a little bit of bottom. Now I can update the loudness, and I've got detailed information here in terms of pre-effects and post-effects. And that's a pretty big one in terms of if you're trying to mix to a specific loudness spec for a specific deliverable. So now I can see my pre-effects level, and I can also see my post-effects level, right? Very, very useful. Now, another thing I can do is if I wanted to merge these moves I had, let's say I was using a couple different plugins and I wanted to actually print this or render this in, I can actually right click over here and I can bounce the track. And what it's going to do is it's going to bounce the track through the plugin, which in my case is a Pro EQ that's existing on that track, and it will render that in place. So it's obviously changed the level completely, and we have a brand new file. So if you need to do some corrective EQ moves before you're starting anything, you could go ahead and do those and bounce those or render those EQ moves or whatever processing you're doing. And then of course, we have our updated loudness over here. So lots of new features in terms of the project page. And like I said, if you want details on that, then the best thing to do is head over here and we can scroll down to project page, independent track markers, flexible loudness detection options, new loudness meter, new spectrum meter, DDP import, improved metadata editing, pool and project page, bounce track option, dynamic search, faster rendering, new command bounce track includes track inserts, not master effects. Extended out to project, lots and lots of new things over here. New split track at cursor commands. So just a ton of different options available in terms of what we're able to do in our project page right now. And even this visual update looks very nice. But we still have all the same features that we love that we had before, but it's just much more streamlined in my opinion now. So we'll go back to Studio One over here. Now, I really can't stress enough, how fantastic this update is. And one cool thing is in terms of the instrument low latency monitoring path. If I record enable this, it really allows you to have a fully tracked out production and then say, I need to do some vocals or I want to track some overdubs with a virtual instrument. And you don't have to worry about, freezing tracks, bouncing out things, doing things in a different session. Simply set an appropriate dropout protection setting in the performance monitor over here, high, medium, maximum, whatever you need to balance your CPU load of your playback tracks, and then just get your audio device block size as low as you possibly can. And you might find, at least I found in my experience, that even on interfaces that I had before, I was able to get things pretty low using the native low latency monitoring path, which is the green Z over here. Now here's kind of a little hidden nugget, if you will, for anybody who has a Studio 192. So I know a lot of people with a Studio 192 are thinking, oh man, I'd love to get that quantum. But here's the deal. If you're using the Studio 192 and you want to use it with the Blue Z, which would mean that you're using the hardware low latency monitoring and you're able to have the same workflow where you can link your native and DSP fat channels the same way that it previously worked. Mind you, you don't get the new fat channel modules in terms of the new compressors and EQs, but you still get the original ones and you can link to DSP or print. Then what you can do is you can work in hardware low latency monitoring mode, which would be represented by a blue Z instead of a green Z, but then you could still go ahead and enable your low latency monitoring for your instruments. So you really get the best of both worlds, and that's for people who haven't upgraded to Thunderbolt yet. So extremely powerful feature set. You know what? There's a lot of new features, but these are some of the ones that really, really stuck out to me, and I just wanted to do a quick video to kind of show you guys, give you an overview. But like I said, for the new audio engine here, just keep it simple. Get your device block size as low as you can, and then set an appropriate dropout protection level enable your low latency monitoring for instruments. And like I said, I can't imagine anybody not wanting to use the new native low latency monitoring options that we have, because they're just so fantastic. Whether you're doing vocals, voiceover, even guitar work. I've got a track over here. Let's go ahead and activate it. It is a virtual guitar amp, S-Gear 2 from Scuffman. This is part of the Slate Everything bundle. I've got this set up over here. I'm going to grab my electric guitar. Okay, we'll go ahead and close this down. I'm going to take this out of record mode and we'll record enable this track. And I mean, I'm able to play that very comfortably. And technically, if I wanted to, I could bring that down. But we're at 2.67 milliseconds of round trip latency with the Quantum using a native low latency monitoring path. And like you see here, this particular plugin, if I open up my performance monitor, you can see that it is monitor effects and we're at 0 latency. So it's not adding any latency. Now, with the CPU usage over here, if you really want an accurate representation of what's happening with your CPU, you're going to want to monitor your activity monitor or whatever the case is. Not just looking at the Studio One monitor, because just because this is at 40%, that doesn't mean that I'm using half of my system resources at all. That means that this particular core of my CPU is being used, and that's the maximum usage. But very, very easy for me to play this and get fantastic results at an audio device block size of 32 samples. So that's just about all the time I have here. I've got an in-depth series coming up for Groove 3 that should be out within a couple days, but just wanted to kind of do an overview video so you guys could see some of these new features in 3.5 and just give it my endorsement. I think they've done a fantastic job with this, and hopefully you guys see the same type of performance increases and stability that I'm seeing, being able to monitor at ridiculously low audio device block sizes and having sessions that were playing at 60% in 3.3.4, having them play back 20 to 30% lower, and then doing overdubs with a device block size of 16 or 32. I mean, for me, it's fantastic. Anyways, I hope you guys got something from this, and we'll talk to you later. Cheers.